Hi, good afternoon. My name is Stephen Wilson, and I'm currently working for GlaxoSmithKline, the Consumer Health Division, which, if anybody knows about GSK, the Consumer Health Group is actually the poor relation of the two. But on its own now, since the joint venture with Novartis is now a £6.5 billion business with global brands, which some of which are displayed on here. I'm definitely going to get my knuckles wrapped because I've forgotten to put the big one in there, which is Panadol. But most of those products that you see on the screen are things that are probably in your house today or things that you've bought, things that you've used. And we started off in consumer health about 4 years ago, launching what you all know, and I knew before I joined GSK, as IBP. I've had to have my head reprogrammed because in GSK, they weren't happy to use the same name as everybody else. So we call it CCC, which stands for the Core Commercial Cycle. I kind of think they understand why they did that, because at least it brought in an understanding that this was about commercial business, and it meant we had to involve everybody and integrate everything from finance, commercial, supply plan, procurement, logistics, everything under one central program. They started about 4 years ago. We've had some limited success in some markets. Some markets it's been a complete fantastic uptake. Other markets, perhaps we will not talk about those unless you want to buy me a drink afterwards. We started with a three-step process, a standard process that everybody knows and loves, which is a demand review, a supply review, and an S&OP meeting. So three-step process. 57 markets went live. And it's amazing how you can get 57 versions of a three-step process. So I was brought in about a year ago. I've been in the IBP space now for about 15 years. And my role at GSK is to try to bring about some standardization of that process and enhance it by introducing product innovation, enhance it by bringing in a whole financial planning process and doing the integrated financial planning so that we get to a final stage of having full IBP. However, I don't want to bore you to tears with IBP because at the end of the day, most of the people in this room, I guess, are familiar with a drawing that looks something like that. A five-step process where you have a product review, you have a demand review, you have a supply review, you do some form of reconciliation with finance, and ultimately you have an S&OP meeting. I think most people would recognize that as good quality standard IBP. What few people who talk about IBP actually ever talk about is that's great, and because there's a lot of companies out there believe if I just put those 5 steps in, suddenly my business will be 100% better off than it was before. And lo and behold, they go out and they have people in, they pay a lot of money for consultants to come in to introduce this 5-step process. And nothing really ever happens. 2 years later, they get fed up with it, they go back to their old ways of working. Some of that is down to people and change and behaviors and mindsets. Some of it, a small proportion of that, is down to not having enough tools to be able to do things, to do analytics. But the piece in the middle that I get quite excited about is this thing called process. Because sitting below this 5-step process, there's a whole load of tactical, each one of those dots has got behind it a whole series of tactical activities that make up those dots. And few people ever talk about those. So what I'd like to do with you is share with you over the next few minutes something that we tried in GSK in one of the larger markets where I was asked to facilitate replanning of the tactical processes. We had, from start to finish, I started at the customer, worked my way back to supply chain, and found 28 separate meetings that were taking place. Those 28 meetings were duplicates of duplicates, with the same people often attending, with different agendas, with different sets of data, and no wonder they couldn't get the demand process, planning process to work. So we sat in a room around a big jug of coffee and lots of brown paper and post-it notes, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that type of game. And by the end of the day, we'd taken that down to a series of about 12 meetings that take place in a structured format. So I just wanted to share with you over the next couple of minutes the structure that we have now adopted. We've tried it, we've been running it now for the last 6 months, the result of which has seen our average forecast accuracy for that market increase by 5 percentage points. Doesn't sound fantastic, but in a big, fast-moving consumer goods company, that's not bad. Well, this is going to work in... Is it going to work? No? Back. So this is a suggested process that we've now developed. So instead of taking the demand review meeting, which is the single dot, and saying that's the only thing we have to do, which happens here, in Workday 9 every month, we always have had, and we still have today, a demand review meeting on Workday 9. But all the work that has to take place before you get to that demand review meeting is more important than the actual demand review meeting itself. So we had this phase, a lot of people talk about a pre-demand review meeting, the pre-DRM, and then the pre-DRM. So what I've become now used to talking to people and saying, if you take your demand review meeting in any one month, you know you're going to have another one in the following month. The time that it takes between one DRM and the next, that entire 28 days, is pre-DRM. And pre-DRM is not a meeting, it is a collection of sub-processes. So I just wanted to quickly take you through what the type of things and type of activities that we do at each of those stages. So what we do about almost 3 to 4 weeks before we get anywhere near a DRM meeting, we have these series of small demand reviews. These are led by the customer account managers. They're led by commercial. It's a customer-by-customer review. So it's looking at historical sales, it's looking at promotions, looking at trends, looking at their demands, looking at their distribution changes, and coming up with some key views and key assumptions that are going to drive forecasts for the next 2 to 3 years. We do a lot of CPFR activity at that bottom end, right at the customer. GSK pays employees to work in many of our big grocery channels. So there are people working in Tesco's offices, in Sainsbury's office, who are paid GSK employees, working with those people to understand what's happening, getting right down at the coalface information. We then have people who are controlling maybe 2 or 3 accounts. So we start to pull it together. We're now starting to consolidate information. And we call these the controller reviews. Previously, the controllers were trying to run all of those single meetings on top of their own meeting themselves, and it was getting a complete mess. So we've taken these controllers and pushed them back further up the chain and allowed the people who run the business day to day to run the business. Then we have an inventory review, which we stick in the middle because we work in FMCG. A lot of our products have got shelf life. We can't afford to just keep dumping it. So we're looking at what stock's in the trade, what stock is downstream from our distributors, and we understand all of that, and we're bringing that together to say, so here's our total net requirement at the store, but we've already got this amount of material in the market. This stuff's already in the trade. We know we've got new products coming in. We need to sell some of those products through. Having done that, we then have some alignment because we have these people who live in the head office at GSK House, and I'm sure most people have been past it on the M4. You can't exactly miss it. These people who run the brands, these people who run and look after the big brand names of Panadol, the big names of Corsadil, the big names of Sensodyne, these people who sit in their ivory tower and believe that they are gods of everything. So we involve them to get their idea of where we're heading with the brand. Are we now aligned with brand strategy? So we've now got all of that information together, all that market intelligence, all that business intelligence, then we can have our demand review meeting. So the demand review meeting doesn't just happen by magic. We've done this in a consistent, structured way that brings it all together for a demand review. All of these steps, by the way, as you see as going through, and I'm going to let where's he gone? Leon have this presentation, so if anybody wants a PDF copy of this afterwards, they can. Each of these steps along the path, we have inputs and outputs, and we have clear responsibility. The ownership of the entire process is with the demand forecasting team. So there's no particular sense, it's not owned by commercial or owned by supply chain, it's owned by the demand forecasters. They run this process constantly. Having done that, we also have to then go and talk to the people who are bringing out new products. On average, GSK is launching something like 20 to 40 products per category, per year, per market. There's a lot of newness. We set ourselves a target to have a minimum 25% of sales from products that are less than 3 years old. A lot of innovation, a lot of churn. We talk about the 24-month rolling volume value forecast. That's starting to become a bit now stupid because half the products we're trying to forecast won't be here. We also look at our promotional activities. So we build all those on top. And finally, having done that, we go through our S&OP meeting. And at the end of the month, we have another little review that says, so how well did we do all that? Are there things that we can change to even that end of the process that are going to help us? And one of the key things that came out of that was a recognition that we need to do some weekly dip tests. So every week now we have on Fridays or Mondays, and in some markets now it's Fridays and Mondays, where we look at the weekly sales to ensure that everything is tracking against what we predicted it would. So I'll leave you with, that's something as a suggested process. It worked for us. Is it perfect? No. We will continue to innovate. But I just wanted to share that with you and maybe use the last few minutes I've got left to hopefully get some iterations between yourselves and maybe get some people here thinking about what you do. Are you willing to share? Do you think this is good, bad? Could you think things that we could change? Are there things that we could do differently based on your own experiences? Yes? I think you need a, hang on, you need a, I could see you talking, I could see your lips moving, but I couldn't hear you.
I'm from Seabook Crisps. I head up supply chain there. We have a similar strict process like you have here, which is great, and the demand planners all buy into it. Our biggest challenge is the other stakeholders who we're used to having that level of input and control and how they move to work with us. And I just wondered, in your experience of doing this, either at GSK or elsewhere, how you've overcome that more cultural side of change.
Yeah, certainly we did have some, we like all that process, but hey, I know what the number's going to be, so here's the demand plan for the next 12 months. Okay, so what we did, we were brave enough, I'd got a team of 10, 15 people in designing this process. Not my process, it's their process. I just facilitate it. I hear your number, you've heard their number. Why don't we measure the actual against your number and their number? And over the course of the next 6 months, whichever one is right, I'll either abandon this and we'll just take your gut feel number, or you'll buy into it. And they looked at me as if I'd grown two heads. I said, no, we'll measure both. It's no skin off our nose to measure these numbers, and we did. This is still running. It's just being brave and just saying, yeah, okay, yeah, right, but this is what we're going to do anyway. Anybody else got? No, not yet. I haven't caught that one yet. I've got to be brave. It's about, I was approached by, it's one of their larger markets. It was clearly in a muddle, clearly in a mess. Forecast accuracy and bias were all over the place. And they asked me to facilitate. We've done this. It's now starting to show some really good results. We're now selling this into the commercial team. Well, if it works here, and the approach I'm taking is, tell me why it won't work in your market, rather than you must do. Just tell me why this won't work. And so far, we're getting some curiosity from other markets, because although it's a global company, it's still, there's a lot of localization and a lot of egos to massage. So I've got to help them understand, why wouldn't this work in your market? Yep, Yeah. Well, that's what we're doing. We're sort of like little road shows. We're showing off the results. Well, I'm not. Sorry, I use the term we. It's the team are now showcasing what they've done, and we're allowing those to go to other markets and say, well, this is what we've done. Do you think you can learn by what we've done here in this market? It won't work in all markets, particularly where we've got several markets who are fixated on consumption-driven forecasting rather than direct sell forecasting. We've also got other markets which are 100% distributor. So not every market will be able to use this in its entirety. We may have to make some modifications to it. There's a man in the white shirt.
Do you mean it's facilitated by demand planning?
The whole thing end-to-end is facilitated by demand planning.
But the meeting itself is owned by sales and...
Sales and marketing own it. It's a commercial process.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the commercial GM signs up to the forecast that comes out of it.
And have you got a comparable set of meetings for supply and for...
That's what we're working on right now.
That's the next step.
So if I'm allowed to come back next year, maybe I can show you what the team have developed for the supply side. But my approach has been I know I've been doing this for 15 years and I could probably have designed this for them over dinner one night and given it to them. I would admit that I probably helped steer them in a certain direction, but I let them believe it's their process, not mine. And now I'm allowing them to showcase to other teams around the world. But we are going to do the same with supply, and we're going to do the same with product launch as well. So there'll be their own brand new global processes.
Hi, I'm Karen. I head up the supply chain team for the medical division of Danone. And we have a fairly similar process. And probably the biggest bone of contention for us is how we handle risks and opportunities.
Yep.
So we debate them at demand review, we debate them at the controller review stage, and then we debate them again at the DRM. So how are you handling what goes in and what stays out as far as risks and opportunities?
It's the next step on our journey. We've recognised that risk and opportunities, and all I'm doing is encouraging people to raise them, and we're documenting them, we're recording them. We have agreed standard way of documenting risks and opportunities. They have to have a name, a person, and for every risk needs to have some form of mitigation. If the risk or the opportunity is greater than or equal to 70%, we've just taken, where did we get that number from? It was a number up here somewhere. We've taken 70%. If it's above 70%, it goes into the consensus forecast. So we take that into consideration already. For the smaller risks and smaller opportunities, we document them, and then we rank them according by financial impact. And that they all get rolled up to first of all, a local S&OP meeting. If they're not resolved there, they get escalated further. And there's a feedback mechanism that talks about how the risk and the opportunity has been agreed or signed off. So there is a structured process. It's only been running now for about 3 cycles. And it's part of the other dot with the tactical bit behind the S&OP. I was just trying to allude in here that everyone talks about those 5 dots, and as long as you've got those 5 processes, you'll be fine. But it's the work that goes behind them. That's what I was trying to showcase this afternoon on behalf of the team.